Hi there everyone, this is Camille Harith, owner of Camille Marie Coaching. I am a counselor and a certified parent coach. I work with families with children ages birth up to age 9, and I specialize in working with families that have children with ADHD. So as you know, it's October. Happy fall, y'all. It is also Dyslexia Awareness Month and ADHD Awareness Month. And so today I'm going to be talking about those two things. More specifically, I'm talking about neurological conditions because, in case you don't know, ADHD is a neurological condition. Dyslexia is a neurological condition. And more often than not, if someone is diagnosed with one neurological condition, it's common for them to have another. So ADHD is a neurological condition that impacts everyday function, prefrontal cortex, it impacts reasoning, attention span, short working memory, ability to retain information, ability to focus, things like that. Dyslexia is a learning disability that impacts reading and writing. And so if someone is diagnosed with ADHD, it is common, which is again a neurological condition, it is common for them to have other co-occurring neurological disorders, such as dyslexia, dysgraphia, which is a reading disorder, dyscalculia, which is a disorder that impacts arithmetic and math for someone, and autism spectrum disorder. Those are some other neurological conditions. It's also really common for people that have ADHD to also be diagnosed with and have anxiety. Those tend to go hand in hand. Neurological conditions like the ones I listed and anxiety are all hereditary conditions, meaning that you can get them, they can be carried on from parents or other family members. And then the anxiety piece can really be exacerbated or also brought on by someone's environment. And so if you think about someone that has ADHD and just the challenges they can face in their everyday world, anxiety can really be exacerbated. And so one of the things over the many years I've worked primarily with foster kids, actually. I've worked in the foster care system in some capacity for 16 years. I have seen I've worked with hundreds of kids that have been diagnosed with ADHD. More often than not, they're diagnosed by pediatricians. Now, one of the things I've also noticed, and I know to be a fact, is that 100% of those kids in the foster care system, in one way or another, were exposed to trauma. And what I know, my agency is a trauma-informed agency, and I'm very well educated on trauma. One of the things I know about trauma is it can present as ADHD, just the way it impacts the brain and someone's function. And so because of that, I would say that I have also worked with a lot of children that have misdiagnosed with ADHD. One of the things I have noticed over the years that I have come to believe very firmly is that it is irresponsible of pediatricians to diagnose ADHD. And to no fault of the parents, right? They just want to do what's best for their child. They're coming to the pediatrician with all these concerns, but because we know, and the parents don't necessarily know this, but we know that people that have ADHD also tend to have these other co-occurring things. And what I see more often than not is the pediatrician is missing these other diagnoses. What I recommend for people that have any concern that their child has ADHD is to go to a neuropsychologist. The reason for that is, let's first look at what are other neurological conditions? Parkinson's, MS, epilepsy, seizure disorders, right? A pediatrician or a physician typically refers out to specialists when there's things that are larger than just that kind of generalized umbrella that a pediatrician covers. So when you go to a neuropsychologist, for example, that would assess things like ADHD, they look at the child as a whole. They gather data on their social function, their emotional function, their learning function, like reading and writing. They gather information from their educators, from their parents, longitudinal history. They look at their sleep patterns. They look at what was the pregnancy like? What was the delivery like? Has there been any trauma? They gather so much data. And they look at the cognitive function. They look at the processing speed. There's so many things that they look at. And so if you think about a child that's diagnosed with ADHD, but they also have dyslexia and, let's say, moderate to mild anxiety, but the pediatrician only knows how to diagnose the ADHD, or thinks that that's what's going on. They maybe don't have a history of the trauma that might have caused the behaviors, or irregular sleep patterns that cause the behaviors of ADHD, or what look like behaviors of ADHD. So we treat the ADHD with medication or not, however the pediatrician recommends, and things aren't getting better. Maybe they're a little better in this area, but they're not getting better. Well, you're missing these other diagnoses. So if we want to treat the child as a whole, how can we do that if we don't have all the information? Another difference between having a pediatrician do diagnoses like this versus someone like a neuropsych eval, a neuropsychologist, is a pediatrician typically is going to give you a diagnosis, and then they might recommend meds. And I'm not here to talk about whether meds are the right way or wrong way. I think that's a very individualized and very personal decision for every single family to make. I also know that meds is not the only solution. We need to look at accommodations at the child's school. We need to look at accommodations in the child's home environment. We need to look at what can we do behaviorally to support this child so that they're gaining that working memory, so that we're helping them make decisions, so we're helping with that impulse control. And you just don't get that from a pediatrician. And you could be missing other diagnoses that are impacting the function. So doctor might be up in the meds, but things aren't changing, and so we keep up in the meds. And why aren't things changing? Well, you might have some other diagnoses that you're not tackling. And so whether you are, and that's what I love about the parenting program that I teach, because number one, whether you medicate or not, we need to address the behaviors. We need to teach these children how to have working memory, how to have increased impulse control. Teach the parents how to regulate their emotions, because as a parent with a child that has ADHD, I know how overwhelming and frustrating it can be to have a child that it's just harder. It's just not the same as parenting a child that doesn't have it. And then if you have these other co-occurring disorders like learning disabilities, anxiety, that are diagnosed or not diagnosed, either way, it's an additional challenge. And so what I do in the parenting program that I teach, specifically right now, I'm going to be running a group parenting program for families that have children that have ADHD specifically, is I teach those tools. I teach those coping skills. I teach families how to guide their children to do the behaviors they want them to do. I help teach positive emotional recognition and emotional regulation, not just for the child, but also for the parent, because oftentimes the parents get dysregulated because they're so overwhelmed and frustrated with the behaviors the child has. And in addition, because it is a hereditary condition, oftentimes the parents have these things too, and so they lack the skills themselves, which is to no fault of their own, right? So I would encourage you to go over to my website, CamilleMarieCoaching.com, and get on the email list, so I'll be sending out information. Also go to my Facebook page, Camille Marie Coaching, where I have a Facebook event where I'm going to be pushing out a ton of content about more information about that parenting class and what it looks like, when the pre-registration date opens, which is October 14th, when that closes, and when classes begin. So if you have any questions about any of this content, please go ahead and send me a message. I look forward to hearing from you. As a mom with a child that has ADHD, I've been there. I am there every day. I live it. I understand it. And I hope that I can help you. So have a great day. Thanks.